In this video, we're going to set up a brand new Revit project for architects. We're going to set up levels, grids, and elevations, and then we're going to talk about project base points and survey data, right? We're going to bring our survey data from site into our project, set up our true north and our project north so that we're able to start modeling properly so that everyone can link our project into their templates as engineers or any other subcontractors, and they're going to be able to have a really good and seamless integration with their Revit models as well. So this is specifically for architects to set up their brand new Revit models to make sure that you can remain professional in the workplace and set it up in a proper manner so that it integrates properly with BIM 360. Before we get started, I want to let you know that all my courses are for free on this platform called School. It's the first link in the description. You have beginner courses, advanced courses, as well as walkthroughs in all aspects of Revit, engineering, and career. You can go through all of these courses, and if you have any questions, you can DM me personally. You can have one-on-one video calls with me, or you can ask the community where I will or someone else in the community will get back to you regarding any questions regarding Revit. So click that link in the description and join my free learning platform. Let's learn how to set up a brand new Revit project properly. Right, so this is the screen which I'm greeted with when I open Revit. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to the side underneath models. I'm going to select new. It's going to open a new model. It's going to ask me for the template which I need to use, right? If your company already has a model which you've loaded into Revit, you can select this and you should have already loaded it in. You can select that template. However, since I don't have one of those, I'm going to use the template which Revit already gives me, the architectural template, and use that to open it, right? By the way, if you're an engineer, I have a separate video talking about how to set up models if you are an electrical engineer, hydraulics engineer, plumber, HVAC engineer, all of that stuff by taking the architectural model which has already been created. So you can go and find that video and watch that if you're an engineer. But this is for architects who are setting up brand new projects, right? So we will see that we have a template which is very basic. You will see on the side you have level 0, level 1. In 3D views, you only have one default 3D view. If you go down and look at sheets, you have one default sheet, right? What we need to do, the first thing is we need to change, or we need to make sure that we're working with the correct project units. So I'm going to select UN on my keyboard, and if I just type in UN, it's going to open this dialog box for project units. You should make sure that everything here is correct the way that you want it to be. Right, so for length, this is what I care about. We're measuring it in millimeters. And in Australia, which is where I'm from, we use millimeters. So we measure doors and ductwork and plumbing work and electrical lights all from the grid lines in millimeters. So I'm going to use millimeters for this case as well, right? So that's been done correctly. One more thing which you need to know is that usually when we open a brand new Revit project, right? Think about a Revit project which has already been created. As we open it, and you'll probably see this when you open any models which Revit has already saved, like any sample projects, you will see a cover page, right? I'll give you an example of what that looks like. This is an example of what you might get on Revit, right? I took this straight away from the Revit sample projects. As you open Revit, you're going to come up with this cover page, right? And this cover page has all the information about the project, right? It will tell you that the project has been, is in a certain town, right? It's going to tell you the name of the project. It's going to tell you the client, right? In this case, Autodesk. It's going to tell you a bunch of information, maybe have some pictures about where it is. Give some information over here. This might be some legal information or some disclosures which they have to make, right? And this is generally for architectural projects. If you are a consultant, like an engineering consultant, and you have a Revit model, you will have your splash page, which has information such as things to do with disclaimers and legal notices and stuff like that. It's going to be a little bit more in depth. However, for architects, we usually have a cover page which we base everything off. It has all the information, right? So the reason I'm telling you this is because, let me just get rid of this now. We want to make sure that we set up the correct information in the project before we start. So since we don't actually have a cover page, we only have, if we go down to sheets over here, there's only one sheet over here. It's called unnamed. So if you double click that, you'll see that there's some information over here, such as project and title and client, right? Make sure you fill these out. So let's actually fill these out. So if we do project name like hospital, right, for now, and then we say the owner is, just type my name, so type in Hesh, right? And we change the project number to like 123, right? What you'll realize is if you create another sheet, and I'll show you this right now, if I go view, sheet, and I just create a new one, so right now there's two sheets, the one which I had open, remember this is what I did, and the one which I just created, you'll see that everything, if you zoom in, is auto-populated, right? So the information which you put on the cover page, if we decide to make this the cover page, will be auto-populated in your other sheets as well. So you want to make sure that when you start your project, you're populating all the information, such as the project name, the client, any details, the address, the geolocation, and all of that stuff, so you don't have to do this later on, right? So this is just something that I thought I would show you, just so you understand, okay, you just need to do this once at the start. It's a good practice, and it will carry over to all the other sheets, right? So let's close that out for now. This is all I had to do with setting up a project. I just want you to understand that we usually have a splash page if you're a consultant, or a cover page if you're an architect, right? Check your project units and make sure that they're in the correct units. And after that, we can now start adding our grid lines. What we need to do now is we need to set up our grids. So if we go to one of these tabs, if we go back to the architectural tab, you will see that we have, under this datum sort of tile here, we have an option for grid, right? The shortcut for that is GR, as you can see. So if we select that or use GR, we can now place grids on our level 0 floor plan, right? So I can go from here to here, click, right? And after that, just click enter, or not enter, but just click escape rather, and you can escape out of that. So I've just placed one grid, right? You'll notice that you have a bubble over here which says 1, but you don't have anything on the other side. Usually with grids, we want to have bubbles on both sides so it doesn't get confusing whichever way you're trying to read the drawing, right? So you want to click this box, and that's going to turn the bubble on this side as well, right? Maybe let's move this a bit further up like this. And what we can do is we want to change this grid to A, because I want to have vertically A, B, C, D, E, and then I want to have horizontally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if we change this to an A, you can actually click that bubble and click A on the keyboard, click enter, and it's going to change this side as well as this side to an A, right? So if I now use the copy command, which is CO on my keyboard, I can select this and I can go down, and you can see on the screen there's units. It says 3200. As I move my mouse down, now it's 4100, right? This is because we set up the units at the start with millimeters, right? Since I'm working with millimeters, what I'll do is I want it to be 6,000 millimeters below, which is 6 meters. So I'll go 6000, click enter, and this is going to set up that next grid line B underneath A automatically at 6,000. And as you can see, I didn't even type B, it came up with B, right? So again, go down here, 6000, enter, down here, 6000, enter, right? So now you have A, B, C, and D, right? Escape, escape. What I'll do now is I'll click grid again, and I'll draw from here to here. If it's annoying for you to draw, and if you click escape, you have to turn this on, what you can do is I'll click Control Z, so you see that. I can click grid, but in my type, since it says grid bubble, if I click edit type, that's going to allow me to edit this grid family, which is sort of like the grid which you're placing, and I can just select plan view symbols end 1 default. If I select that and I click OK, now what's going to happen is by default you're going to have on the top and the bottom bubbles, right? As you can see, this is defaulting to E, but I don't want that. I want 1. So I'll just click this, select 1, click enter, and I'll do CO on the keyboard. Click, move this maybe 5500, 5500. Again, move my mouse 5500. Again, move my mouse 5500. Enter. So now we have some grids. Let me actually center this. So I'll take this and I'll use the move command, which is MV. Click here, move it, sort of centralize it. And now we have grids which are 6,000 from A, B, C, D, and 5,500 between 1, 2, 3, and 4. What we can do is with these grids, as you can see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, not grids, but elevation circles. You can actually, underneath this elevations, you can see east, north, south, west. These are going to be set up in your template, so you have them. You can select east, for example, and you can see that we have what it looks like from the east. So you can actually see A, B, C, and D. What I'll do is I'll actually tile these views just so you can see this as well as the east elevation at the same time. So in order to do that, I'll just go to view and I'll go tile views, and it's going to tile both of these views. So this is what we created initially, and this is what we can see with our elevation. We see an east elevation. What you will notice is that our levels have to be extended. So I'm just going to take this and this node over here, or this node over here rather, and extend it all the way. Take this bottom back node and extend it all the way, right? So that they're just visible from all angles. And you might have to actually go around to each of the elevations. So now let's click north and actually edit each of these just so that it's visible. So this is a common problem which happens. You want to make sure that you are properly placing all your grids and all your levels so it's visible from all directions of the model, right? So that's what we're doing. We looked at east, north, south, west, right? And we have our grids. So this is plan view on the right hand side of the screen. We're looking at it from the top. This is an elevation view, right? So we're looking at it from the side of each of the buildings. So we can see the different elevations, right? What I do want you to do now is after you've placed your grid lines, I want you to select all your grid lines. So that's one way of selecting it. You can also go right click and you can go select all instances in the view, right? And I want you to pin them. So if you go to your keyboard and go PN, I didn't type that properly, PN, should work. Not sure why it's not working. Because if you go here, it says pin, right? So you want to use the command PN. There we go. Didn't do it properly last time. And it will pin all the grids into place. As you can see, they're all sort of locked, right? So if I try to move this now, I can't actually move it. And this actually saves you a lot of time and a lot of grief, because what you'll do is if you sync this to the main server and someone else in your company starts using it at the same time as you, if they move a grid line, then everything is screwed, because we're not going to know which grid line was moved. We have to go back and check everything. The best thing to do is make sure that these grid lines are all pinned. So you can actually unpin here, UP, or you can pin here, right? Just so they can't move. And I would recommend doing the exact same thing with these levels. These levels need to be pinned. This one needs to be pinned, or you could have selected both of them and you could have pinned them, right? So now let's actually set up our levels. You'll see that we have level 0, we have level 1. If I wanted to add an additional level, I can just click level 1, CO on my keyboard, click this, and then go up maybe 4,000, all right? Because we had 4,000 between level 0 and level 1. It's going to create level 2, right? You'll see this is above A, B, C, and D. So what I can do is, if I just select one of these, right, and I try to move this up, I won't be able to move it up because I pinned it before. So let's unpin this. I'll unpin this one, right? And we'll select this bubble and move it up. And you'll see that everything moved with it, even though, right? Even though this is still pinned and this is still pinned. Just because I unpinned this and they're all in the same level or like in sync, right? I'm able to move them all up at once. And I can just pin this again, right? So Revit's pretty smart with things like that. They'll all move in tandems, right? Even the levels over here, if we want to extend it or reduce it, it will all move together. Again, let's select this so we have our levels on both sides. And what we'll do now is we'll actually rename our levels, because we don't want to have level 0, level 1, level 2, because we have a ground floor, level 1, level 2, right? So let's change this to ground floor, right? If I just click this and I type in ground floor, what will happen is, and I want you to watch this, right? Right now, we have in our views, we have level 0, right? That's what I changed to ground floor. I changed the elevation to ground floor. Once I click enter, it's going to ask me, would you like to rename corresponding views? What that's asking me is, I changed your level, you changed your level, do you want to now change the view, right? Initially it was level 0, do you want to change it now to ground floor? I personally do want to do that because I don't want to call it level 0. So if I click yes, we now will see that initially we had level 0 here, which is like the view. Now we have ground floor. And even on the side, underneath this views tab, we have ground floor. Initially we had level 0, right? So we're looking at it from an elevation perspective, right? The elevation, initially the level was called level 0. We changed the name of the level. That changed the name of the view, because the view is looking from the top. As we look and we look at the project sort of in the plan view, which is like the bird's eye view, we used to call that level 0, but now we called it ground floor, right? I just wanted to show you one last thing in terms of grid lines or levels. When we have our ground floor, if you want to have a structural slab or sort of a foundation level underneath that, we can have that. So if you do CO and then you go -900, or like you don't need a negative, you can just type in 900 because your mouse will specify the direction. What you can do is we can rename this to foundation, right? So it's going to rename both sides. What you'll see is there's a bit of an overlap, right? You have ground floor and you have foundation, and there's an overlap here. So the first thing I'll do is let me just bring this down. So let's unpin this and bring this down so it meets the foundation. Pin it again, right? So with this foundation, since I can't see the 0 and the ground floor, what I can actually do is once I've clicked this, there is an option over here to add an elbow, right? So if you hover over this, it says add elbow. Click that. It's going to sort of bring it down, give it sort of like an elbow, so you can actually see that 0 and you can see that foundation. But what you can do now is actually move this off like this, and you can move this node this way. And you can do it exactly the same on the other one. So you can add an elbow here. You can move this node this way. You can add this and move it this way, right? So now you can actually see that word foundation. You can see 0, you can see -900. Same on this side. You know, you can play around with it to make it look pretty and stuff, but that is the general idea of what people will do whenever you have a lot of grid lines and things are right next to each other. The same thing can happen with the top, because you have a level 2, you might have a roof level, right? The roof level and level 2 might be very close to each other because you might have like a steel structure on top, and you might want to just have that roof level for some reason, having that steel structure only, you know, like a few 100 millimeters above it. So it could happen at the top as well. Obviously, you can add more levels, as many as you want. What you'll also realize is that some of these levels are blue and some of them are white. And what's the reason for that? Well, the reason for that is if it's blue, it actually has a view which has been created already, which is associated with it. So anything which is blue, which is ground floor level 1 here, these levels, if I double click this level 1, it's going to take me to that level 1 view, right? So let's go back to where we were before. If I double click ground floor, it's going to take me to ground floor, which is already open, which is why it's just taking me and it's highlighting this. But it's going to take me to that view. If I double click level 2, it doesn't take me there. The reason is because level 2 I created afterwards, right? Do you remember I only had ground floor and level 1? I created level 2 afterwards, and because it was after, I haven't created the view yet. So as you can see, you have ground floor and you have level 1. We don't actually have level 2. Since we don't have level 2, there's nowhere to go. So that's why we actually have something white here and we don't have it being blue, because we actually haven't created the view yet. This is also another reason that if we change this foundation to like foundation 1 or something, it doesn't ask you, do you want to rename the corresponding view like it did before, right? So I can change this back to foundation. I can change it to foundation 1, anything I want. As soon as I try to change this to like ground floor 0, it's going to ask me, do you want to change the corresponding views? If I click yes, it changes everything because I already created a view. As you can see here, ground floor 0, ground floor 0, it changes, right? Since I haven't created my foundation view, I don't need one. That's why I haven't created it. There's nothing to change, and therefore you can't click here. I do need to create a level 2 view or like a level 2 sheet, but that will come later when I create my floor plan there. Let's talk about project coordinates, specifically project base points and survey points. So as we set up our model, we want to make sure that we're setting it up correctly with the survey data and also have a project base point so that we know exactly how to move our project with respect to our survey data. So the way that we can actually find this is you can turn in your view settings. So if you type in VV on the screen, if you go to model categories, if you go down, there should be something called site. And as you find site, you can just click anything and click S. It'll take you down to S. So in site, there should be something called survey point. So you can turn on your survey point and your project base point. So this is project base point, this is survey point. If you tick both of those, it'll actually turn it on your view. So let's just click OK, and it's brought up our survey point and our project base point. Alternatively, if you actually go to your site plan, if you go to your site, it actually would have been there, but I'm just letting you know sometimes you're using a different template and it might not be there, your project base point and your survey point. So you can turn them on whichever view you're at, right? So on our ground floor plan, we have our project base point and our survey point. As you zoom in, it doesn't actually become bigger or anything. It's just in the middle of the screen. So you can hover over this, and right now it says that's your project base point. If you click tab, it'll toggle between the two. So you can now select your survey point, and it says 0, 0, 0 there, bunch of coordinates. If you click tab again, right, you can click your project base point. So I'll move my project base point. You can just click it and drag it over to the side wherever you want. And what you'll see is as you move it, your north-south and your east-west dimensions start moving. And it's in respect to your survey point. So your survey point right now is at 0, 0, 0, right? And your project base point is going to be moving with respect to that. As I move it close, as you see, your east/west becomes a small number. Right now it's 85. As you move it up, right, or left and right rather, that east-west becomes bigger, either positively or negatively. Same thing, it's just like a coordinate system. So I'll place this here for now, and what I want to talk about is this survey point. So this survey point, we want to fix that survey point and then give the project base point some sort of conditions, right, in order to move it with respect to that survey point. So at the end of the video, what I want to do is I want to set it up similar to this. So this is just something quickly that I created. You have your true north here. Let's just say that you have your project north, which is going to be at a 30-degree angle to true north. This is where your building is going to be set up. So your grid lines will be set there. And you have your project base point coordinated at that top left-hand corner. So that's just going to be, maybe we'll consider that to be grid 1A. Right, so that's going to be where we set up our project base point, and you can set it up in different ways. If you have a certain minimum clearance all the way to the fence, if you have a fence here, maybe you have like a 4-meter clearance that you need to have there, then you can set up your project base point there because it's less likely to change. The general idea is you want to make it so it's easy to explain and less likely to change later on, right? Generally, what we try to do is set it up to the ground floor slab, top of the ground floor slab, in an area which is not likely to move. So the intersection of two grids is very likely to be where it's going to be set up. So for now, let's set it up similar to this. I'll just move this off to the screen on the side. And we'll say that our project, we'll leave our survey point here at 0, 0, 0. And we'll take our project base point and we'll go and place it in between 1A, and we'll see that the elevation is 0. So what that means is your elevation is 0. If we go to our elevation, which is west, right? You'll see that elevation 0 means that it's on the ground floor. So what that means is if you have a slab which finishes on ground floor, it's going to be at the top of that slab before the ground floor starts, right? What I'll do actually is I'll just take this out, place it here, so everything is just bigger for us to see. So pretty much we have a survey point and a project base point. What I want to do now is I actually want to move the project in order to replicate these values here. So in the north direction, 720000, same as east, and your ground floor elevation, and it's 30 degrees rotated. So what I like to do is I like to do the rotation first before we actually move it north, east, and the ground floor elevation, just because if you try, in my experience, if I've tried to do it the other way and try to do the rotation at the end, it gets confusing, and yeah, it's just not worked for me in the past. So what I want to do is get it out the way by doing the rotation first. So let's do a 30-degree rotation with respect to our survey point, okay? So the surveyor, let me just give you a small rundown of what's happening. The surveyor will come on site, right? He'll come here and he'll set up his survey somewhere, like his survey equipment. And then he'll say, okay, with respect to this position, this is going to be 0, 0, 0. 0 elevation, 0 northeast, and 0 southwest, right? Or whatever those two dimensions are. And from this point onwards, I'm going to measure to my project base point, which is going to be grid 1A and top of slab of ground floor. What is the distance north? What is the distance east? And then what is the elevation? So then I have a survey point and a project base point, okay? So this is where everything is located, and this is where I've set up my survey. So these two are going to be the two linking that we do, right? So this is the site, and you can have different buildings on your site, right? You might have another building, let's look at my screen, somewhere up here, somewhere up here. But as long as you set up your survey over here, then you can go, okay, with respect to that, this is the coordinates. With respect to that, maybe up in this building, you have a base point here. With respect to that survey, in this building, you might have a base point there, right? So you can look at different buildings in the same site with this project base point, as well as your survey point. So that's what we're trying to do here, right? Hopefully that made sense. So what I'll do is, in your floor plan, you will realize that everything will be set to project north. But if you set it to project north, it's going to always rotate in a way which is aligned, right? I don't want to align it like that. I want to change this to true north, right? You'll see nothing actually changes. But you'll start to see when we click this project base point and we go angle to true north, we click that and we type in 30, click enter, what's actually happened? Everything has rotated, right? This is still 0, 0, 0. That's your survey point. Doesn't matter how that changed, but everything has rotated. If we go back and click this and go back to project north, it'll rotate back, but it doesn't actually mean it's rotated back. All it means is that now let's align it back so you can actually start modeling properly, so everything's not at an angle. And if you want to see in respect to the site, in respect to the survey point, let's go true north, right? And okay, this is actually how it is with respect to the survey point. That's how they talk about things here, right? So one more thing which I did want to say, you can move this around, and this is where like your 0, 0, 0 is located, and this will change with respect to your survey point, right? So the values which I had here are different. So that's 5609 to the values which I have down here, because you're just relocating the origin, right? Imagine a Cartesian plane, an axis. If you relocate the origin, you relocate the coordinates, even though the coordinates might stay the same, right? But just one thing here, make sure that this paperclip is not doesn't have a cross through it. Because as soon as you put a cross through the paperclip by clicking it, now if you start moving this, for some weird reason, you have a survey point which is at a certain northeast, east, west from that initial position, right? So you can sort of lock it into place, and you can click this and you can edit it, and you can lock it into place just by clicking this. That just makes it so that wherever you move it is going to be the new origin, right? As soon as you click this, that is where the origin is, and you're moving it with respect to the origin. So it's sort of like locking the origin in place, right? So for now, it doesn't matter what this is, because I'm just going to leave it as what it is right now, okay? But what we're going to do now is we're going to relocate our project, right? So that these three values are going to be the three values that we had according to our site. I want this top one to be this, the second one to be this, and the ground floor elevation to be 69, right? But we can't actually just change these values, because if we change these values, let's just change this to like 8, something random, it actually just moves the project base point and doesn't move the whole project. So we have to use this thing called relocate project under the manage tab in order to actually move the whole project with the project base point, but the survey point will stay, right? But it's sort of using the move command. If you're using the move command, you need to know how much you're going to move up, left, or the elevation, right? And in order for that to happen, you want to make sure that we're both starting from the same position, right? This is with respect to 0, 0. So I want to actually start everything at 0, 0 first. So what I'll do is I'm going to take my survey point, and since I can move this without anything changing, I'm going to place my survey point on top of my project base point. So now my project base point is 0, 0, 0, but at an angle of 30 degrees, right? So now the reason I'm doing this is when I go to my manage tab, position, relocate project, and I click, I want to relocate it from here, I can actually move my mouse up and I can type in 720000, click enter, whoops, don't want to dash there, 720000, click enter, and it'll move everything upwards, right? Because I wanted them to be on the same position on top of each other, because then I knew, okay, from this position, you move this much up. Because before, if you have them misaligned, I don't know what the distance is between this and this, and I have to do some math calculation in order to move this, right? So that's why align them first, make everything 0, and then move the project through that command. What you'll see is your survey point actually stayed at 0, 0, 0, but your project's now missing because you moved it all the way up. So the easiest way to find it is take your mouse, the scroll wheel, double click that scroll wheel. You can actually click your scroll wheel. So once you do that, you'll see you have your survey point, and then you have your project, which has been shifted all the way up. If we zoom in, you can see that your project base point, it still says true north 30, but then it says 720000, right? Let's do the exact same thing and relocate project, and we're going to relocate it from our project base point, and we're going to go to the east, and we're going to type in 760000, enter. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to go missing. Just to remind you again, the reason I did 760000 is because of this. Yeah, you want to go north, east. Double click your scroll wheel so you find the project, and you'll see if your project survey point is over here, 0, 0, 0, then you go here and you click and you see we're getting there, right? We have our first value, second value, we have our true north rotation, we just don't have our elevation. So the last thing you want to do is go to your elevation view. So you can go to anything. Let's just go to east elevation, and let's relocate our project upwards. So then you go back to your view, your manage tab rather, position, relocate project, and you just click anywhere and you go 69, 0, 0, 0. Because what we're doing is that's 69 meters. So if it's 69 meters, it's going to be 69,000 millimeters, right? Yeah. So once we click that, we can go back to our ground floor just to see our floor plan. And you'll see that, okay, in the east, if you double click it, you can actually find your, you can find your plan again. You might have your north and south elevations back to normal. You might actually have to fix your grid lines because everything's been moved up. But if you go back to your ground floor plan, you'll see everything is perfect. And the project has been relocated as per what we wanted it to be relocated by, right? So very simple. If you've messed up at any point at all, the best thing to do, right, is go back, find your survey point, make sure that there's no line through this paperclip, right? Because if there is, then you move this and consider this to be the origin. But if you don't have a line through the paperclip, it means that you can move the whole origin back up here and you can just try the whole thing again, right? So now if you do that and you go to your project base point, click your project base point, you'll see everything is at 0, 0 again. You only have your elevation because we didn't move the elevation down 69. But the elevation doesn't actually matter. The only thing that happens is you want to do the rotation first, in my experience, before you move it up or left, because otherwise it can get confusing. But I'm just going to Control Z that because this is exactly what I want. And you can go back to VV and you can go Model S Site. You can get rid of your project base point and your survey point because they're actually useless now because we set everything up. Click OK and it's gone. So if you want to double click your scroll wheel, it'll actually just bring you back to the grid lines without actually zooming out because there's nothing here because we just hit it from the view, right? Now if you want to start modeling, what you can do is you can just go back, instead of true north, you go project north, and it doesn't actually rotate everything, but it just rotates the view so that you can see, okay, now we're referencing true north, we're referencing the project north, which is the north of the building, so we can actually start modeling, right? And once you model, and if you put like a wall from grid 1A all the way to D4, and you go back and you change this back to true north, everything will rotate again, right? So that is the process of setting up your base point as well as your survey point to make sure that everything is perfect before you start.